Welcome to Concrete Block, the podcast where we dive into the latest news and stories from around the world. I'm your host, Walter. Today, we're taking a closer look at the situation in Cuba, where widespread protests took place back in July 2021. The protests were sparked by a combination of factors, including food and medicine shortages, power outages, and economic hardship. As we explore this story, it's essential to understand the complex history between Cuba and the United States. The U.S. has imposed a long-running trade embargo on Cuba, which has had a significant impact on the island nation's economy. While some argue that the embargo is necessary to pressure the Cuban government to reform, others see it as a form of collective punishment that hurts ordinary Cubans. Our reporting takes us to the streets of Havana and San Antonio de los Baños, where we speak with locals who shared their experiences and perspectives on the protests. Some, like 82-year-old Nieves Fuentes Osoria, expressed strong anti-U.S. sentiments, calling the embargo a genocide and vowing that Cubans would resist any attempts to undermine their government. Others, however, took a more nuanced view. University student Robert Perez noted that those who participated in the protests have faced retaliation, including difficulty finding work or starting businesses. This has created a climate of self-censorship, where people are reluctant to speak out against the government for fear of reprisal. We also spoke with individuals who were more concerned with everyday survival than politics. Ariel Anillo, a 52-year-old charcoal vendor, told us that, while Cubans are resilient and can cope with power outages and food shortages, the threat of imprisonment is a powerful deterrent against participating in protests. As we examine the situation in Cuba, it's clear that there are no easy answers. The country faces significant challenges, from economic hardship to human rights concerns. While some argue that the U.S. embargo is a key factor in Cuba's struggles, others see it as a necessary measure to promote democracy and reform. We'll continue to follow this story and provide updates as more information becomes available. For now, it's clear that the situation in Cuba remains complex and multifaceted, with no simple solutions in sight. We'll be right back with more of today's top news on Concrete Block. Welcome back to Concrete Block. We're diving into a complex story that's affecting multiple industries in India. A conflict in the Middle East has led to a shortage of domestic gas supply, and it's having far-reaching consequences. The Indian government is trying to regulate LPG supplies, but companies responsible for importing, transporting, and distributing gas are facing significant challenges. Fertilizer and tile manufacturers, auto ancillaries, and consumer durables companies are all feeling the pinch. For example, tile makers like Kajaria Ceramics and So Many Ceramics rely heavily on LNG and propane, which account for approximately 70% of their fuel costs. With international LNG spot prices spiking by over 46%, these companies may see a significant impact on their production volumes and margins. Meanwhile, gas importers and distributors like Petronet LNG, GAIL, and IGL are struggling to secure supplies and manage the pass-through of higher costs to end consumers. This is creating both volume and margin risks for these companies. Additionally, consumer durables, companies like PG Electroplast and Amber Enterprises are facing supply restrictions due to the gas shortage. It's not just these industries that are being affected. The ripple effects are being felt across the economy. As the situation continues to unfold, it's essential to monitor the developments and assess the potential long-term impacts on India's economy. The government is working to mitigate the effects, but it's a complex issue with many moving parts. We'll be keeping a close eye on this story as it develops. In the meantime, we encourage our listeners to share their thoughts and insights on how this gas shortage might affect their industries or communities. Welcome back to the show, folks. We're closing out today's episode of Concrete Block with a fascinating look at the resilience of African economies. A recent article in Foreign Affairs highlights the surprising advantages many African countries are using to navigate global economic upheaval. Despite common narratives about the continent's vulnerabilities, it turns out that several African nations have made significant strides in building stable institutions, diversifying their economies, and leveraging regional integration. The article identifies 4 categories of African economies: trailblazers, builders, adapters, and stabilizers. The trailblazers, which include countries like Morocco and Mauritius, have achieved impressive levels of economic stability and are driving productivity growth through investments in technology and human capital. The builders, on the other hand, need to strengthen their institutions to unlock their full potential. The adapters, such as Tunisia and South Africa, are using their institutional strengths to reduce external exposure and build more resilient economies. One of the most significant findings is that many African countries have developed robust fiscal capacities, with tax-to-GDP ratios exceeding the World Bank's recommended 15%. This allows them to maintain public investment even when external financing is disrupted. Regional integration is also on the rise, with intra-African trade increasing by 12.4% between 2023 and 2024. However, it's essential to acknowledge that weak governance remains a significant constraint for some African economies. Nevertheless, there are many examples of countries with strong governance capacities, such as Cape Verde and Mauritius, which rank significantly better than the continental median in terms of governance vulnerability. So, what does this mean for investors and policymakers outside of Africa? The article suggests that they should recalibrate their risk assessments and recognize the continent's resilience. By directing more capital towards trailblazer countries and working with adapter and builder economies to address weaknesses, they can unlock new economic opportunities. As we wrap up today's episode, it's clear that Africa's economic landscape is more complex and dynamic than often portrayed. By understanding the differences among countries and recognizing their unique strengths and challenges, we can work towards a more nuanced and informed approach to investing in and partnering with African economies. That's all for today's Concrete Block. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and until next time, stay informed.